Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Somebody approached you about going into buds.
Yeah, one of my friends who I went to high school with in Minnesota, he kept, he was hitting on me all the time, to go into the military because he was having such a good time, with it. And this was back in the day too, when people would say you're kicking in doors and doing stuff, and that was fun. Where I don't know if you even say that anymore in the military, but it's just different. So he was saying, yeah, I'm kicking down doors and shooting all this stuff. It's awesome. And I'm like, all right, that sounds pretty intense. And sounded just right up my alley, right?
Was he on the teams?
Went from insurance to full blown military in a matter of months.
Was he
Say that again?
Was he on the teams?
For the Marine Corps, yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's similar to SOCM, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
So they have their own command, but he was on I don't know. I think he called it Ghost Recon or Force Recon at the time. Yeah. It's similar to MARSOC right now.
Yeah. So you make the decision to join the Navy, and you make the decision to go into buds. So talk about that for a second. You decide to go into the Navy. You decide to go into buds. What made you decide to go into buds in particular, right? And what was that like?
It was like playing college sports on steroids.
Oh, that's cool.
With weapons,
Yeah. Wherever you blow stuff up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing, you got to hang out with a bunch of dudes that were on the same page and getting after it every day. And the only difference was instead of baseball bats, we were using M4s and swimming, miles every day instead of, running around the track every day, and so it fit right into, my kind of mentality. And, it was a good time. We had a lot of fun.
That's cool. After buds, you're on the teams?
No, right before we got pinned, I ended up getting injured during a training exercise. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, man. I didn't realize that. Okay. So you were injured and you were basically medically discharged?
So yeah, I had the option to go into the big Navy or separate, and so I just said I'll take my, I had my 4 years at this point, so 3.5, and so I was pretty close to getting out anyways, and I just said, I'll take my disability and get out of here.
Gotcha. So what was the number one thing you learned owning your own insurance agency?
Flipping gears here back to insurance. The biggest thing with the insurance was, picking up the phone and calling people. At that time, it was, again, these are different times.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 15 years ago when people actually made phone calls every day, and and that's how I built my business out here still. But there's different laws and things that have changed where you can't do the same aggressiveness on the phones and do the same things. And, people have, different expectations, so even in the last 5 years, a lot of things have changed in the real estate industry where, same thing, you have a different, just a different route and so, I guess like relating it back to the insurance, the insurance was always, you'd get in the door through the garage,
Yeah.
and so that was with the auto insurance. I could come in and say, hey, let me beat your rate. Let me get your car insurance. And then I'd say, well, I can get you a better insurance with your home,
Right.
and so then you get into the door through that. And then once you're in the door, you'd say, all right, hey, look, I want to provide you protection for your whole family, and we'll find out what exactly is going on in there. And so then you give them life insurance, provide the financial services aspect of it. And so that's really where you get that full inclusive, protection all in one. And so that's kind of the same thing. You do the same approach with the homes, right? It's like, what's my way to get in the door, and so some people go door knock, some people make cold calls, some people do funny videos online or whatever, right? And other people just build relationships. And that's always been my thing, is just you got to talk to 10 people a day. You got to do the numbers, chop it up, whatever your goal is for the year, break it down and work it all the way back, and so how many people do I got to talk to today, and so I just kind of keep a little running tally in my head. And okay, that was 10 people, or that was pretty close to it, or whatever. It's like I look at my calendar today, I totally forgot about this call, and then I got a reminder, and so but I'm glad that I'm on it, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. But yeah, it's like I had a meeting at 9 a.m. This morning I went for a walk with one of my clients in Thunderbird Heights, out here in Rancho Mirage at 7:30. We got done with that at almost 9. Went home, changed out real quick, and popped into the office and getting ready for my appointments this afternoon. I got 5 showings this afternoon. We're heading out to Joshua Tree, coming back here. I've got 2 other listings coming on right now, so we got to prep for that. I just got a new team guy that came on to my team, and it just keeps going. And you just build and build and build.
That's cool. So I'm going to switch gears for just a second, if it's okay.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing you learned being in the Navy?
Just honor, courage, and commitment. It's that integrity, really, that's the biggest thing for me. There's so many agents that I run into that just don't put integrity first, and for me, that was always been the strength, is, I'm gonna go in and just, like I said, build a relationship, make sure that I'm putting that front foot first of, being full of integrity, having, that honor and courage and commitment or whatever, and making sure that I'm doing the right thing, even when everybody else isn't, right? And so that's kind of where I, separate myself, is that I don't really, growing up and playing at a high level of sports, you learn to not get to go to the parties, not get to go to the, the hunting trip or the camping or whatever, and making those sacrifices really early on. And so that's always been engraved in me, is, I don't really care about the events and the galas and all the things, and you got to do that. That's part of it. But for me, people, you get confused. There's so much stuff going on, and you think, oh, I got to go do this. I got to go be a part of this and spend this money and that money. And at the end of the day, if you just break it all down, it's just, you need to go talk to people.
Yeah. That's really what it's about, man.
That's all it is, and so, if you're doing the right thing, and you're putting that person's needs first, whatever they are, that commission check is going to come.
Yeah. So in real estate, you've been in real estate now for 14 years?
Just about 8 years. Yeah.
Or 9 years. I'm sorry, 9 years. Yeah, about 8 or 9 years. So when you got into real estate, there were some similarities to the insurance business, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In terms of, you got to talk to people, you got to build relationships, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Did you get into real estate in the same area where you had your insurance business?
No. Yeah, I had my insurance agency in Minnesota, so it was a completely different market, and I could kind of draw off of that circle of influence a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Here, it's like I had to start fresh, and so that was, can be a little daunting for people, but it's almost, for me, it's almost refreshing, in some ways, because, you can kind of create whatever you want to create, so you don't have a lot of that, view or, bias of people from wherever you're from. It's kind of like family, right? Like family can be the greatest or the worst, and so they're like, I don't like that judgment, being placed on me in any way, but, it is what it is. And so, for me, it was just building that circle, building that foundation, and starting fresh.
Gotcha. Did you start in the like Coachella Valley area where you are now?
Yep. So I mentioned that I have a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And so, right before I moved out here, I met his mom, and then, we progressed into having a child really fast. And then after that, she kind of, went her own way. And, at that point, that's when I had the, opportunity to, raise him, on my own for 4.5 years. And so, he's such an amazing, little kid. And that's kind of also what, has helped me kind of, keep my life, going straight. But it's tough, like, being a single parent. I completely understand how, there's just a lot of discord, in families. And so, I understand it's tough, it's not hard, it's not easy, or it's not easy. But, I've been fortunate to, have that. And I mentioned earlier too that, I do have a brother in Phoenix. He's my younger brother. So in many ways, like, being an older brother and the firstborn, you kind of, raised to be that more father figure anyways. And so
That's true.
it's been easy, easier, I guess, pardon me. So yeah, no, it's a blessing. And, I'm really grateful for everything that's happened to me. It creates character. So
What's your favorite thing about being a dad?
oh man, just seeing his smile. I mean, last week he brought home 100% on his spelling test, and he's in first grade. He goes to a wonderful school out here, called King School, and, it's just been such a blessing. But, he brought home 100% last week, and, just the look on his face, when he told me, he starts messing with me. I was like, "How'd your spelling test go?" Because we were studying for it, and he's like, "Oh, I missed it. I missed a couple." And he's 7 years old. And I'm like, "Oh, that's all right, buddy. Like, get him next time." And he's like, "No, I got 100%." And then, I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And, he's just so proud about it. And so just seeing that stuff happen, that's the joy that, I like out of parenting is, even though the times can be challenging, and sometimes the minutes feel like months and the months feel like years or whatever, it's the most rewarding, thing that I've ever been a part of. So, it does have its rewards. So, if you're in that situation, just keep going.
Yeah, they grow up fast, man.
It's too fast. Yeah.
Enjoy every minute, because mine are 24 and 26.
Yeah, right. They're still hitting you up.
Yeah. Well, they're awesome, dude. They're awesome.
Yeah.
The cool thing is I'm having conversations with them about, and my son used to do the exact same thing that your son did with I missed a couple. Psych. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I know you haven't heard that in 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, where in the world do you get this from? And then
I know.
your family's like, he's just like you. He's just like you. You used to do the same thing when you were 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool, man. It's cool. So being in real estate, you're working with buyers. It sounds like you got 5 showings this afternoon, right?
Yeah, buyers and sellers. I'm mostly a listing agent, but the way that I get buyers, especially in this market, is you just pull them off your listings. And so they come in and they're unrepresented right now, and so there's a lot of people that are out there ready to just be scooped up, and so that's kind of a good way to get in the door again. Is having open houses, finding brokers that agents that have opens or listings that they can't have open houses at. like I said, we got 2 other listings coming on today too. And I wrote one this morning. So, it's like we're busy and, have stuff going on and activity. And so there's, a lot of places that people can have opportunities to find these buyers and really help assist them because, I'm a big believer. And so, I'm really involved in our church and locally here. And so, I feel like we're shepherds, in many ways. And so there's people that we just need to help shepherd into the right solutions for them, and then it's not always what we want, but really understanding their needs and then helping, guide them and advise them and where to go. And so, like I said, there's just a huge opportunity right now with underrepresented buyers, putting listings on. There's way more inventory. So there's a lot more opportunities.
Cool. So 2 questions and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Sorry, man. I have a lot of questions. I'm just
I like it. Yeah, this is good.
And you heard curiosity killed the cat, right? That's 9 lives, baby. So, right.
Yeah.
So as a representing buyers, as an agent representing buyers, what's the one thing that you feel like separates you from the competition?
I don't know. I don't really know my competition that is like working with a ton of buyers. Usually they kind of kick it out to, their team people, or their, support staff or whatever. So, I think again, that's, an opportunity, is that, you're working with a top agent that knows what he's doing, and so, if you are a buyer's rep, just do your homework. I see so many of them coming into listings that they don't know the information on the neighborhood. They don't know the information on the houses. They're just kind of, taking whatever listings the person had shown them off of Zillow or Realtor.com. And I get that that's a big source of people where they go searching, but part of our job is to also advise them on those different communities, where that house is, what the schools are like, what the people are like in that neighborhood, and what the houses are like in that neighborhood, when they were built, how, who built them, who was the builder, it's like, there's a lot of information that, you can be sharing with them. And my mentors and my people that I look up to in this industry, that have been in it for 30 or 40 years, that's what they do, and that's what they did. And so I think a lot of that gets lost, kind of in this, new school, old school, kind of thing, I maybe I'm more old school, but I appreciate that. I want to be treated how I want to, I treat people how I want to be treated, and so if I was working with me, would I be wanting to know those things? And, when I was a brand new agent, I was kind of like, oh, whatever, that doesn't matter. That information doesn't matter. That's not what's going to sell the house. And, as I've become more mature and become more of a veteran agent, and, it really does, and that information makes you stand out from the rest of the people, and knowing the comps, knowing knowing those houses. So, it's big.
Yeah. It's your level of professionalism, right?
100%.
And it never hurts to be a dad. Seriously, man. Because you start looking at it differently, right?
Oh, for sure.
The best things that ever happened to me was I started having kids.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of a sudden it changed the way I looked at things. Everything wasn't as transactional. It was more about what I could do to pour into my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So as a listing agent, same question. If I'm a seller and I'm looking to have you potentially come sell my house for me, list it for sale, what's the one thing that you feel like sets you apart from the competition?
It's kind of the same thing. It's coming in and knowing the house, knowing what's going on, knowing what they're looking for, but really just putting, what their needs are first. It's like my first question is always, where are you going to move to, or why are you guys, why are you looking to sell? That's kind of, it sounds stupid, but it's like that's uncovering what they need to what their goal is, not mine. My goal is obviously get to sell their house as fast as possible. That doesn't change on any house, but it has to fit in with what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So, I mean, I've got one right now that's a 1031 exchange that, it's up in Galt. I didn't want to be a part of it. I was trying to get it referred out, but I got too involved with it, and the seller for it, has 5 other houses out here in California too. And so she's like, "Hey, Dan, I just want you to be a part of this. And, I've had other agents in the past. And so, I still referred it, but, now I'm actually a part of it, which is fine. But, it's like, that kind of says something about, my approach as well. It's, very, very advisory role based. I try and give them all their options. Part of that approach, really stemmed from, being in and out of, court with custody and all this other stuff. And so my attorneys, that I've always had, always give me the good, bad, the great, and the ugly, right? They lay it all out and say, this is what's going to happen or what could happen, or, and then you try and empower your client to make the best decision, and so that's kind of the same approach. It's like, here's everything, here's all the information, and I want you to, be empowered to make that decision. And so that's really why I think people like that, is it's more advisory. It's not transactional.
Right. That's cool, man. So let's say somebody's listening to this and they want to talk to you about buying or selling real estate. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, we're on Facebook, social media, Daniel Stewart, PS, for Instagram. I've got my phone number direct is 619-677-0900. You can get me on email, whatever, the easiest way. Office is right downtown in Palm Springs. I'm at Coldwell Banker. So it's pretty easy. We're on the corner of Palm Canyon and Tamarisk, so right in Palm Springs. Yeah.
Cool deal. Anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I really appreciate you having me on, and thanks again.
Daniel, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.